I really think New York is poised to be the next hub for AI. And I think it's really simple. It's because the demand is here and the talent is here. A few like stats, which, folks may not know, right? 44 of Fortune 500 companies are headquartered here. There's also a lot of really good research talent here. So NYU Silver Lab, that's like the top AI lab that feeds a ton of folks to Meta. It's led by Jan LeCun, who is Meta's chief scientist. The top labs from Columbia, Cornell Tech, Princeton. They have a great NLP institute with Donchi Chen and Kartik Narasimhan, as well as just great international talent. Startups moving to the US, whether it's from Europe or Israel, new grads. And so like a few other stats, and then I'll share a little bit of the Lux portfolio. Majority of the Lux AI portfolio is here. I think we have a pretty darn good portfolio. Hugging Face is headquartered here. Runway is headquartered here. Mosaic ML, which was acquired by Databricks, their research team is largely here. Osmo AI, that's ML for olfaction, if you haven't heard of it. They're based here. Modal, really cool serverless inference company based here in New York. They also have a Swedish presence, and so that's one of the drivers for them to be in New York. Together AI cloud, they're crushing it, have a great go-to-market and Eng office here. So we already have such a great and high-density group that it's kind of unsurprising to me that we've seen these great results already.
Welcome to Sorcery. I'm Molly O'Shea, founder of Sorcery. Today, we have Grace Isford, partner at Lux Capital, and 2024 Forbes 30 Under 30 in VC. She joined Lux in 2022 and shortly after was named the youngest partner in the firm's history. Grace invests into companies innovating at the nexus of computational sciences. Since joining, she has sourced and led 8 of the firm's investments, including generative AI, video standout, Runway, now valued at $1.5 billion, Sakana AI, Maven AGI, and LangChain. Before Lux, Isford was a principal at Canvas Ventures, where she sourced $100 million in deployed capital and worked with 10 portfolio companies. This is a really fun conversation, and we go deep into AI, NYC, and future predictions. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Grace. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. I've known you for pretty much my entire career. I think we met early on in a women's investing group in New York City or San Francisco or something.
Definitely pre-pandemic. Yeah, 2018,
it was
2019.
Definitely pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've had an amazing career thus far. You've worked at Canvas, and since then you've made some pretty incredible investments into companies like Runway, LangChain, Sakana AI, Together, Reflex. Could you just share more on your investment strategy and how you got into this category of computational sciences?
Totally. And thanks again for having me on. I've also been very impressed by everything that Sorcery has accomplished and honored to be one of your guests. It really does feel like we're coming full circle. And I think you've followed my career for a while in some ways, so you kind of understand how the computational sciences all got started. But how I got into it really goes back to when I worked at Handshake. Handshake is kind of like a LinkedIn for college students. I actually worked there as part of this thing called the Mayfield Fellowship Program, which I did at Stanford. And that's like a work-study program where you get to actually work at an early-stage startup. And when I worked at Handshake, we were a pretty small team, but we had a really sophisticated data and infrastructure stack. We were dealing with a lot of sensitive student data, helping curate that right on these profiles that were private, and then in turn working with them to get both career centers and also kind of these enterprises on board to, for example, recruit a Stanford student to take your pick of major corporation. And so I learned a ton there of, machine learning is cool, but there's all these other systems and things that have to work, like an API or like data reliability or like a data warehouse. I learned what that was, right? And some of these early tools were coming out. So that like DBT had just come out. It used to be called Fishtown Analytics. It was a consulting firm, right? Census, right? A lot of these kind of transform companies that are basically helping you work and move data around kind of your emergent data stack. So I really credit that time. And a colleague who I work with there is now major head of infrastructure at a major AI startup today. And so I credit that experience for really exciting me about the whole world of this kind of computational sciences, which is really a fancy way and a very nerdy way of saying cutting edge software. So that's all inner workings of how things work. So AI and machine learning, dev tools and open source, fintech infrastructure, blockchain infrastructure. How do you get kind of that end product in the hands of users? It can really go pretty wide reaching as far to like vertical software too, and some of these vertical applications we've seen of AI. But what really gets me excited are these kind of complex technical problems to make sure that end user has like a super delightful experience. And so then, of course, Handshake led me to end up work part-time in venture at a firm called Canvas Ventures, where I ended up working full-time. And I went down a bunch of rabbit holes with them. And one of the first, I think, was the API economy back in 2019, which if you Google me, you'll find some old Medium posts out there of really trying to dive deep into the project. And for me, a lot of the thesis work I do stems from an answer that I'm trying to find for myself, right? I had a question of how do you categorize, the API economy, or maybe it's a solution to a problem I'm solving. Why is there no good map of New York AI given there's great talent here? And that often is how I kind of lead my own investing, is just what are the questions I want to answer? How can I do that research and then hopefully share it in a way that's helpful for other people?
I definitely remember the API economy. That database.
It's an OG.
That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. The Airtable was wonderful.
Yeah.
And by the way, big credit to you on computational sciences. I think I read that and I was like, damn, I should have came up with that. That sounds sophisticated, but it's not just enterprise software. It's a little bit more, I don't know, higher class nerd.
Well, and I take that from Lux's book, and that's obviously where I currently work at Lux. And we are nerds, right? And we love things, we say, at the intersection of tech and science. And so that, yes, that could be computational science. We also do stuff in the life sciences and also the physical sciences, which is a fancy way of saying, a lot of space and hard tech and defense and manufacturing. And I think there's something really beautiful from a venture capitalist perspective of taking technical risk and backing scientists and backing technical problems, which in many ways a lot of these computational science companies are, of really figuring out, the open source repository that's going to change how software is developed, or, the machine learning inference technology that's the fastest throughput on the market. Those are the sorts of things that in many ways are pioneered by researchers and scientists that we can help bring to light with technology and with investment specifically at a faster stage than they could have without obviously venture funding.
Going back to your research process, so you mentioned you start with a question and then you go down rabbit holes and that sort of thing, but could you draw that out a bit further? I want to get into the mind of Grace. How do you break down these different industries and pull on different threads and find where you want to ultimately go?
So I think it definitely has to start from a kernel of a question, no matter what, right? Where it's, again, back to the API economy. What is the structure of an API company? What does that look like? Usually it's more questions than answers. Usually I don't know a majority of the answers, but it does start from an initiative for myself of this is a question I have. Usually then my next resort is reaching out to other people who I think are experts in the space or field. So that could be, a major leader of go-to-market for an API company. That could be going to reach out to a major research professor at a New York-based kind of university here. And so going to really first principal sources of, okay, great, I'd love to hear exactly what you're seeing on the ground. What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? How would you explain this trend? And then try to ask a similar set of questions to several folks to have a larger N of people to make sure these are not just isolated patterns I'm seeing. And then working from there to get information on who to speak to next. In many cases with the market maps, it's if you're looking at, healthcare API companies, you should talk to these 10 others. Or if you're talking about New York AI, you need to talk to these 10 other people. So it becomes a bit of a recursive flywheel where you usually have a main doc with maybe a framing and maybe my key thinking that will evolve over time as I keep updating it with a lot of this really cool, exciting answers and research. And then eventually I need to mold it and frame it. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes that's hard. And usually, for the most part, the market maps are intended to invest in a company and trying to find, okay, where are the white space? Where are the biggest opportunity? Where are the biggest pain points? What sucks the most? That's usually where I'm trying to drive the map to. In certain cases, and I haven't published a lot of the ones I've done, frankly, because they are proprietary and sometimes investment intel, but is,
Okay.
Talking to 20 people and realizing, oh, this is totally not what I expected, right? Or, oh, like the map of how this evolved, particularly in AI today, is moving so quickly that what was a very great place to maybe be investing in 2021, 2022 is really not the place where there's a ton of opportunity today. So there's a lot of live factors that you have to also take into account. And the timing of these articles, I think, and these market maps really do matter. Of course, I'll go back, the API economy, we reference one more time, is like 5 years outdated now, but it's still a helpful basis if I run into an API company or if I have a thesis on, okay, how is this company disrupting the market? But it's not something that I'm constantly kind of pursuing and chasing in the same way I was 5 years ago. And then you kind of work and kind of compound all of these theses together where they're kind of in my stockpile of knowledge. And I can build on them should I want to. One that actually is a cool through line that has been kind of helpful is I did a deep data infrastructure dive. This is, again, several years ago, which I think has been cool to see how that's evolved, because a lot of those data leaders are now the same people adopting AI and LLMs. And it's not like an AI team, it's just the data infrastructure tech team, right? And so a lot of the same problems we saw with that early data stack, we're now seeing evolved or in parallel right with the AI stack today. So data reliability, like, is the data reliable, is the same question people are asking for large language models, right? Or is it working at scale? Observability, right? Are we running into issues with our data pipelines? Oh, are we running into issues with reliability of our OpenAI API? And so in some ways, like, history repeats itself in this industry. And so these market maps continue to be super helpful, and these network and relationships of people who eventually, start new companies or go elsewhere.
Right. And you've already made a handful of investments at your time at Lux so far. So congratulations. I would love to dig into one in particular. So I'd say, like, to frame this question out a little bit more, like, let's go through your sourcing strategy. Maybe how did you find this company? How did you find the other ones? But it's one particular company that I'm curious about because, it's not NYC AI, it's Japan. So you invested into Sakana. Like, how did you find this company and what kind of got you so excited about it?
So the first thing I will say is we were not actually looking to have a Japanese investment. As much as there's a really cool full circle story on Sakana, because I actually lived for part of my childhood in Tokyo, Japan. And so it's been really special to now be going back there for board meetings. The one thing I will say, though, which does relate to New York, is I think Sakana is great proof, as is Hugging Face in our portfolio as well, that great talent is everywhere, and major metros are particular great ways to attract awesome pockets of talent. And so I would expect to continue to see particularly great AI, but also just great engineering teams and talent in every great major metro, right? We've seen New York developing, as we'll talk about probably later. Obviously, San Francisco has been great consistently. I think you've seen a lot of great stuff in London with the DeepMind team that kind of set foot and established there. Paris, between Mistral, Qtai, Hugging Face, large great engineering presences. And now Sakana, in many ways, is kind of like the DeepMind for Japan. And so that's really exciting and cool. And it's 100 million people. It's a huge economy where there's a lot of reasons why there could be a sovereign AI winner here. But to answer your question, we found Sakana a few different ways. The direct introduction came from another entrepreneur in the Lux portfolio who we had heard about, because David Ha, one of the co-founders and the CEO of Sakana, is quite well known. He kind of pioneered creativity and machine learning research. He studied under Jeff Hinton. He then went to Google Brain after a long career at Goldman Sachs, and worked under Jeff Dean at Google Brain, and was a really well-known researcher, pretty viral researcher as well, for trying really creative and kind of weird contrarian research initiatives that often bear fruit. And the team really stood out here. And that's why we were like, okay, we'd love an introduction. We were trying to find a way in.
Hey, we'll get right back to the conversation after a word from our sponsor. Sorcery is brought to you by Archer. I'm genuinely amazed at what Archer has been able to accomplish. Archer's goal is to transform urban travel, replacing 60 to 90-minute car commutes with estimated 10 to 20-minute electric air taxi flights. They are safe, sustainable, low noise, and cost competitive with ground transportation. Archer's Midnight is a piloted 4-passenger aircraft designed to perform rapid back-to-back flights with minimal charge time between flights. Learn more about how Archer is set to open up a new world of opportunity for passengers by providing safe and efficient access to people, places, and events across the communities they live. Visit archer.com.
David also did work and really admired the work of the Santa Fe Institute, which is this really cool research institution that does a lot of complexity research of how all the different things in our world kind of collide and come together, which it was another reason we were really interested to partner. And then the third reason, too, is kind of the Lux, frontier tech, deep tech, and defense tech angle, right, where we've worked kind of directly with a lot of great companies like Anduril at the seed round and Hadrian and many others, and kind of Japan's unique geopolitical position as a democratic U.S. ally kind of is sitting in a really unique position to work with the US in an exciting kind of AI strategy. So that's all the reasons why I was interested. The last thing I'll say is, in addition to David, the other 2 co-founders are incredible of Sakana. So one is Lion Jones. He was one of the authors of the Transformer paper. He is not Japanese. He's actually Welsh by background. I should get that perfectly correct. And he moved from the Bay Area to Tokyo to the Google office there and just kind of fell in love with it. And then Ren Ito, the COO, he actually spent time in Prime Minister Abe's administration. So he is Japanese by background and worked closely there. He also was CEO of Mercari Europe and has a lot of that more commercial experience to complement David and Lion. So it's a really exciting and cool one. I think to answer the sourcing question, some of our best investments come from kind of, I don't want to say random, but like kind of serendipity, quite literally, where we're kind of creating our own luck of, great, we have a great network, and I think reputation and network is the best currency. If someone thinks of Lux or thinks of introducing Lux to a great entrepreneur, whether that's our own founder in our own portfolio or, another friend or someone in the ecosystem, to me, that's the highest praise and the most important thing to do. So I've done deals from, close friends who are also co-investors and seed investors and angels. I've done cold outreach where I've read a blog post that a founder has written and I've said, okay, wow, that's super interesting. I have a thesis here. I have a market map here. I'd love to talk about it. I've also just straight out hustled, right? And I hear a deal's happening and we'll reach out directly, even when we know the company's actively raising. And then a lot of it is more thematic too of, hey, you're a cool founder, or you look like you could be a cool founder. Often this is when the company's getting started. I love to just brainstorm with you, right? And talk about your idea, how you're thinking about it, talk about Lux's portfolio investments. And so we do really try to go early. And we also try to think about, what our right to win is, whether it's a company where we have a lot of touch points with the founder, or we have a lot of shared kind of thematic combinations.
And so what stages are you coming in at?
Usually seed Series A. I would say the highest frequency of my investments at Lux have been seed. We can come in, and this is a little bit of a pun, but it's true. We can come in from your first 100K to your last 100 million, so we are a true multi-stage fund. What that means in practice, though, is we typically write our first check to you at the pre-seed to Series B. And then those later checks are for a company like Hugging Face, Anduril, who is a bit more mature in our portfolio, where we want to continue to grow and maintain our ownership in our winners. And so that's where you kind of see that concentration of those larger checks come in.
Secondary question, but I just have to ask, Grace, Hugging Face, how do they make money? What is their business model?
Hugging Face is an incredible company. For those who are not familiar with it, I think most people probably are at this point. It's like a GitHub for machine learning, right? And so the most powerful thing that they have, and they will continue to have, and what really predicated our original investment was this incredible community. Their GitHub repo that took advantage really of the key moment of the transformer paper unlock, productizing that, and then kind of becoming in many ways like the toll booth of AI in some way. And so that kind of relates a little bit to the business model. They monetize in a few ways. They have kind of like a freemium model, and that's like, live on their website, where you could get a pro account. So basically it's just like access to the public hub, but with a lot of extra nice things. So things like higher rate limits or, extra access controls or things like that. So for a power user, it's a small fee to pay for a lot of value of accessing and working with a lot of these open source models in a sandbox. They have rev share partnerships and they have enterprise partnerships. But the company is doing awesome, and I think is probably monetizing in an unconventional way, but in a way that's doing really well. And I've been super impressed by what they've done.
Great. I know that the portfolio is very technical. You guys invest into sciences. It's great. I loved that point in all different aspects. How does the team then evaluate each company on a technical basis? Do you work with consultants? Do each of you kind of go in and take apart the stack and understand what works, what doesn't work? How do you evaluate each of the companies?
So at basis, the Lux team is already highly technical, right? As you kind of hinted at. So I believe we have at least 2 PhDs on our team. We have at least 5 or 6 masters. And then on top of that, we have multiple just bachelors of engineering as well on top of that. So I should know the number, but I think we have at least like 20 different degrees of various tenure in the sciences. And so I think that I don't take that lightly, because I think that's pretty amazing. And some of our team members have, done research for their PhDs, et cetera. I've done research. And most of us have coded in some capacity as well. So I think that there's something to be said for just that from the investment team perspective and the network we have as a result of that. In terms of how we diligence, it does depend a lot on the company, right? So the Lux team is a generalist team. So, I am voting and working with companies across sectors, even though I have a passion and excitement for computational sciences. But my colleague David, who's wonderful, who you should meet, he spends a lot of his time in the bio world. And he has a deep expertise. He works at the Broad Institute and did research there, and has a lot of technical expertise there. And so depending on the deal, right, say maybe it was a bio or a bio AI deal, I would take the meeting with David, or we would take the meeting together, right? And so we're already compounding our effect. And the Lux team is much of a team effort. So it's unusual for a company to come into partnership without having met multiple members of the team. Second layer is, assuming it passes team sniff test, is we have an excellent network, right? In part, it's from our existing portfolio of investments. In part, it's people who we've known or met through the years. And in part, it may just be direct outreach. I think actually in part of the New York work I've done, I'm really happy to see the network that I've built, right, in New York myself, right? So it's pretty easy for me to get in touch with a senior engineering leader of a very niche area, because I have enough nodes into certain organizations. And so I think it's the key advice I guess I would give to someone diligencing tech is know the space generally, right? Don't go try to be evaluating technical risk in an area you have no idea about. And if you really have no idea, get up to speed first and try to at least understand the market and do your own research. Assuming you are up to speed and excited about it, make sure you're building your network even in the downtime, right? Of course, you want to pick up the phone and call that person on the day where you need to close the deal. But it's much more useful if you've invited them to dinners, you've gotten to know them, you got coffee with them, and then boom, when I need that diligence call, they're going to pick up the call and they're going to help. And that's been really fruitful for me in terms of both diligencing, but also, converting potential customers for, prospective portfolio companies. And then it's also just a little bit of pattern matching and seeing investments over time. Meaning, if I've seen 10 different companies doing, enterprise AI agents, I have a bit of a perspective on what stands out in that space versus not. And so I do think it's a little bit of, are you in the mix and seeing things that are happening right now? If I had only seen one of those 10 pitches, I may have been much more compelled versus after having seen all 10 of them, the 10th one is a little bit less interesting. So it is also about making sure you have good coverage of everything that's happening in the technical landscape, and as much coverage as you can on the frontier things that are happening and changing and the new models that are coming out.
Excellent, super thorough. Obviously, you guys are a serious shop, and it definitely shows. I want to expand on New York for a little bit. So you went viral for this market map that you made for AI and just kind of cementing New York as a figure in the tech world. There's always a debate. We love the debate. It's so much fun. But so there, like NYC is known for fintech and health tech, but I'd love for you to just break down the NYC AI angle and bring us all up to speed. What is the state of the market there?
Well, I'm still hoping to get you back in New York, Molly. So I'm optimistic that maybe the West Coast has not won out on you. But maybe, after this podcast, you'll be like, you know what, Grace convinced me. I'm packing up my bags back to New York City. But I really think New York is poised to be the next hub for AI. And I think it's really simple. It's because the demand is here and the talent is here. A few stats, which, folks may not know. Right, 44 of Fortune 500 companies are headquartered here. It is a center of major industries, like you mentioned, not just financial services, but also media, fashion, etc., healthcare. There's also a lot of really good research talent here. So NYU Silver Lab, that's the top AI lab that feeds a ton of folks to Meta. That's led by Jan LeCun, who is Meta's chief scientist. The top labs from Columbia, they have excellent machine learning and bio lab. Cornell Tech, which now is a massive campus in New York, which is affiliated with several Lux portfolio companies too. Princeton, they have a great NLP institute with Donchi Chen and Kartik Narasimhan, as well as just great international talent. Startups moving to the US, whether it's from Europe or Israel. New grads, number one choice for new grads to live because they want to live here. And so a few other stats, and then I'll share a little bit of the Lux portfolio. Majority of the Lux AI portfolio is here. I think we have a pretty darn good portfolio, but that means Hugging Face is headquartered here. Runway is headquartered here. Mosaic ML, which was acquired by Databricks, their research team is largely here. Osmo AI, that's ML for olfaction, if you haven't heard of it. They're based here. Modal, really cool serverless inference company based here in New York. They also have a Swedish presence, and so that's one of the drivers for them to be in New York. Together AI cloud, they're crushing it, have a great go-to-market and eng office here. So we already have such a great and high-density group that it's kind of unsurprising to me that we've seen these great results already. A few more things I'll say. 1 of every 7 tech workers moved here. I think it was over the 2019 to 2023 period. There's already 35 AI unicorns here, and that was according to an SVB report. And I will not argue against SF because I do agree SF has an amazing density of talent and it's a great hub, but New York is a clear second and it's growing in momentum. And we're seeing that again in the numbers, right? So SF had a lion's share of AI venture capital of 40%. I think it was over the last year, according to PitchBook. New York is clearly second. They have 20%. That's more than anyone else. And the New York-based unicorns are also growing, and that's across all sectors, right? Healthcare, finance, etc. Based on the healthcare financial question, I really think every company is incorporating AI. So it doesn't even if you're a financial services company, you're thinking about how AI is being incorporated. The Bloomberg team is here, and they've been doing a lot of cool stuff on Bloomberg GPT. So there's actually also a lot of really good healthcare AI companies right here in New York that I've gotten to know. So I view it a lot more as the merging, and the very fact that a lot of customers are here can make it very attractive for an upstart company to be great, I have amazing systems engineers and research engineers from Google and Meta and take your pick, or Mongo and Datadog and all these great companies that are already here. I also have maybe a talent arbitrage because I'm not competing against OpenAI for hiring this great engineer here. On top of this, I'm really close to my customers and I can meet with them 10x more frequently than if I didn't live here. And so I think the pandemic has changed a lot, but also New York has kind of grown in strength, in part in credit to the pandemic. And, folks should read my article, but we've seen the same effects in our Lux portfolio in terms of actually employees at our AI companies moving to New York. So not just do we have companies based here or have offices here, but we've seen an influx of like, I think it was roughly 179 employees of our Lux portfolio companies who moved geographies between January 2020, so just before the pandemic, and mid-April 2024, so a few months ago. 57 of those 179 moved to New York, and that was more than any others. And why was it? Because of urban walkability, a city I just want to live in with a good social life, the focal point of many different industries, right? Financial services, etc., and diverse and cultural institutions, right? A real city, right? And so you're seeing a lot of people attracted because they want to live here, right? Not because they have to live here. And I think they're just really, really poised to take advantage of the AI talent dividend, I say, where, pretty much everyone is picking up their head and saying, oh, how is my job going to be affected by AI? Maybe I want to go try out a new startup. Yeah, I probably don't want to actually move to San Francisco, but boom, great, there's this great article in Map now that I can take a look at to help me find kind of my next thing.
It's a lot. And I don't doubt the real talent.
Did I convince you?
Yeah. You did not convince me. I will continually make my quarterly visits, but every time I go, I get 4 hours of sleep, so I can't do it very often. But no, NYC is great. It's amazing. I go frequently. And yeah, you're right to the point of AI is not just AI. It's in healthcare. It's in fintech. Ramp is like leading the charge in that respect for fintech. Like, it's really incredible. And I guess like to zoom out on AI in particular, however way you want to take this, we've seen like a large swing in the last year and a half. It was, okay, we're going to go and fuel these companies with $100 million to $1 billion. Let's focus on startups. Let's focus on growth stage. Okay, now there's lots of acqui-hires. So where are we in the swing of power within these companies? You also mentioned it might not be the best time to invest in AI. So from your perspective, where do you see a lot of the power or a lot of the value being built?
It's a great question. I think the short answer is it's complex. And it depends on a lot of things, but to try to kind of keep it simple for the group and how I think about AI investments today and kind of where we're at is we're at a really exciting inflection moment where enterprises, buyers, everyone knows what AI is at this point. Everyone heard something about the ChatGPT demo. Every exec's office and every earnings call report is talking about how are we implementing AI. So the mind share is here, combined with the technology is increasingly here in a way it never was before, right? The scale of models you've been able to create, the really awesome, Llama launch just a few weeks ago on open source is democratizing access to this really powerful technology in a way that we have not seen, really prior to the last 2 years, 18 months. So that is really exciting. And there's a clear why now, and there's a clear maturity cycle that we're starting to see of great. We got some foundations set. The technology is still improving. Enterprises are excited. So what are we going to build and adopt? So I'd say we're kind of on the maturity curve, but we haven't hit kind of the S curve of like flattening out yet from an adoption perspective. In terms of how I think about investing and opportunity, I think on infrastructure, you have to be pretty picky. And I'm thinking again more the seed Series A stage. I think at the growth stage, infrastructure and AI, there's a lot of stuff right now, but I think you have to ask yourself, what is the 10x advantage outside of the cloud players? What is the product they offer that is not just a model? Because I do think models in general will become commoditized over time, in particular because of the open source growth and adoption. So what are the other products they're launching, right? And that could be as simple as enterprise fine tuning, right? But it's just define, okay, what are the 5 or 6 other things maybe they could offer that is not just the most performant model. And I think a lot of AI infrastructure companies can't necessarily answer that question. And so I would be careful on entering at high prices where you're spending a lot of money on compute, where exit paths are unclear. I think there are ways you can differentiate, and I'll give a few Lux examples. One is called Together AI. We were founding around kind of in that company. They're, again, this open source AI infrastructure stack that's really become this new AI cloud. What they've done really well is leaned into technical differentiation. They have the author of Flash Attention, Tree Dow, who is brilliant, as their chief scientist. He has a proprietary version of the fastest inference technology on the market that's low cost to serve. and he's built an incredible research team alongside Vipul, the CEO, and others inside in-house it together. And that is really hard to replicate, right? There's a real 10x differentiator there, combined with the fact, of course, that they're open source. And so you don't actually have to work with OpenAI or Anthropic or even Google or AWS or Microsoft in order to get the benefit of these amazing llama models, as an example, or this amazing inference, which you would be hard to do otherwise. So that's a cool example. Developer community is another cool example. Developer experience is another way you could differentiate there. So Modal in our portfolio that we mentioned in New York, they have an incredible developer experience. If you just want to spin up a GPU quickly or maybe have a bespoke task, it is brilliant. And if you talk to users, like they cannot say more effusive things about it. That's a differentiator, and that's a willingness for someone to try out Modal versus an incumbent, right? So that's AI infrastructure. The bar is high, has to be a 10x differentiator, but it's possible for really great teams. On application, I think that's where you're seeing a ton of really exciting stuff right now, particularly applications that we haven't seen yet because we're still very early again on that maturity curve. So on there, I look for things on really good understanding of the user workflow and reimagining that user experience. So Runway, of course, is the example I point to in the Lux portfolio, where they're truly reimagining the user workflow for filmmakers with AI. So they're working hand in hand with filmmakers, they understand how they work, and they're getting a suite of tools to be able to create really amazing videos just from written text prompts. And that can be, as simple as really cool special effects. That can be as complex as a true end-to-end script with AI in mind. And that's hard to do, to be changing an incumbent industry, right? So I think you will see a lot of really awesome AI applications that miss the mark there, right? That aren't truly being innovative enough and being really product forward thinkers, and also aren't thinking about realigning their business model, which we can talk about. But I would say applications and infrastructure are kind of the two sides of the world I think about. And both are kind of treated a bit differently right now.
Right. And where have you seen the multiples and valuations go? Have they normalized at all, or are they still up in the 100x's?
I think AI is the industry right now that is receiving a premium on pricing across our whole portfolio. And so if you're an AI portfolio company, you're going to get a better premium. That could change, but we're still seeing, high valuations and high multiples, 100x range for companies that are earlier in revenue. That's not consistent actually across our whole portfolio because we have a lot of really, really awesome companies where we've seen those high multiples. We've also seen, though, incredible growth and incredible gathering of teams, right? And so I think what you're seeing right now from the investor perspective is, wow, AI is so transformative. Wow, this company is growing users, metrics, engagements, product shipment, revenue so quickly. Wow, I see the future is where the future is going. I'm going to give them forward credit for that because I think this could be super disruptive and create a lot of market value. So that's the framing I think people are doing. I think, of course, there's a lot of questions of how people will get there. And I think at any tech hype cycle or even tech, inflection point, there's always going to be a lot of hype. And so I think you will continue to see a little bit of this readjustment where companies who don't kind of hit those high valuation expectations and that high valuation excitement is kind of how I would frame it, will have to find other ways to exit or maybe just shut down.
Got it. So you're seeing a lot of the premium associated with team and expertise and growth and scale versus, of course, revenues.
For the most part, I think it does vary. And I have seen also some pretty insane revenue growth in our own portfolio companies. So I think it's hard to say that as a blanket statement. Right. But I think for the most part, growth, whether that's in revenue or user engagement, has been what has been driving some of the high valuations. The first one or two rounds are often driven by the team and the research and just who you've been able to establish. But I do think at a certain scale, people are really looking for those growth metrics.
Got it. So a couple months ago, we were both at the Newcomer Cerebral Valley Summit. I had the pleasure of joining your focus group, circle discussion. I don't know what it was called, but you focused on AI agents. And I I'd say from my point of view, it sounded like the consensus was that it was too soon to tell, but you're the expert here. Okay, Grace, you studied it, you know, like the companies and everything, but I would love to know from your perspective, where are we at with AI agents? Are there any particular like tidbits that you got from that conversation that were interesting, insightful? What are your main insights on that?
Yeah. So I think one takeaway is that it's complex to actually define what AI agents are. So I think one takeaway from the conversation for me was that certain people were classifying how they implemented AI agents was a bit different than maybe what others would consider as a true AI agent. And I think there's a little bit of a confusion in the ecosystem of what an AI agent is, which makes everything more confusing on top of it. How I would define it is an AI workflow or an LLM that is able to autonomously control itself, right? So take action, right? And say, great, okay, it doesn't just do one task. It doesn't just respond to a chatbot. It doesn't just send one email. It does like kind of a orchestration of things based on your needs. And so I still think under that definition, the short answer is it's early, right? The long answer is it's more complex because I think in part you've seen a lot of enterprises, again, really excited, a lot of hype and marketing and momentum, a narrative around AI agents here, which is confusing people. And in reality, it's hard to actually make AI agents work at scale. And that's not actually because of the AI in some ways. I think we could argue that I think there'll be better architectures and better data collection ways to make AI agents more productive. And I think we will see that out of top research labs, out of top startups in the coming, 12, 18 months. But in addition to that, you need to be able to make it plug in and orchestrate with all your systems. So you need to plug it into your data warehouse, back to the data infra stack, plug it into all your APIs, right? And actually make sure it works autonomously without you with your systems. And these are complex enterprise systems. And so I think there's a reason why we haven't seen it at scale that is even outside of some of the technical, like true research questions yet. I think where we have seen it actually working at some sort of scale would probably be coding, customer support, or sales. And generally, the ones that have worked better are very verticalized. So they're doing a clear workflow really well. They're not a general agent doing whatever you say and then outputting, 10 different things. I think that is still too complex for the current state of the technology.
Are there any particular companies or projects you're watching?
Yeah, a few in our Lux portfolio are crushing it, and I would plug for. So I think like Factory AI in the coding space is doing excellent. Baton is wonderful. Maven AGI in the customer support space, in Boston and New York, crushing it. And they have a really great underlying tech team. Both of them do have really great underlying tech teams, really understand the user workflow, pricing to value for their customers, and then are thinking about how do you actually keep things flowing and automated for the customer. So it's a true seamless and autonomous resolution for those end users. I'm also really excited about AI as it pertains to like the sciences and like areas where you've still seen very little penetration. So we're investors in Evolutionary Scale. They're a really cool company at the intersection of AI and biology. They actually spun out of Meta. Alex Reeves used to run kind of the bio AI team there. He offered a paper called ESM Fold. To spare you the details, it's kind of like an OpenAI for bio. But there's going to be a huge potential to tap into big data sources, take a lot of key expertise in the sciences, whether it's physics, whether it's chemistry, whether it's material science, and then turn that with a great understanding of that workflow and with this data into really transformative outcomes. And so I think the impact of that on society is so huge that I think we're still just very early from that adoption, let alone, even customer support or coding agents really getting to that scale. But I think where we're going is going to be really, really transformative.
It's super exciting. As we kind of wrap it up, there's one more category of questions I want to talk about. I want to get into buy or build or retrofit. Okay, so I feel like this is an important topic because we may assume that every company out there, every tech company or mom and pop business or you name it, is implementing AI. It's probably not the case. Maybe a couple people are using ChatGPT, that kind of thing. But anyways, like as we've seen, the numbers have kind of gone down in usage. From your perspective, if you were advising a team to drum up an AI strategy or an AI team, or to build, some sort of way to shift their business, how would you begin? Would it be with a 10x engineer? Would it be with, some tools? How would you advise, not just as this scary big term?
Yeah, I think it's easy to be scared by AI right now because there's a lot of products on the market. There's a lot of people selling you lots of things. I think it's very easy to buy a shitty product that maybe will not solve your enterprise problem because a lot of the issues are actually on implementation of the technology. My advice would actually either be to hire like a part-time consultant or a consultant that I'm happy to share names of ones that could help work with you to scope out your strategy. Or even better, if you had someone in-house or hire someone who is, a bottoms-up hacker engineer who has worked with this technology live. There's even startups that will help you implement AI with your needs in mind and help you scope out a pilot and kind of scope out a full-time contract. The thing I would think about for what specifically to use AI for is I wouldn't use AI for everything, right? I would view AI as an enterprise search problem. So where do you have huge repositories of data? Like what are you putting in your data warehouse if you have one? Or where do you have the most data in your system? Where if you could search that data really quickly, it would drive value. And that's where I would start and use that as pointing AI. And you can do a lot with just even plugging in the API to that data and being able to traverse over it. And then the key thing for any AI strategy is how do you prove ROI and value? So it's more important than just, okay, great, we have AI, but it's really important to be so great. We plugged into AI, we implemented AI, and it actually works. And it's actually providing value. And so I think doing those things in tandem, being thoughtful about the problem you're solving and being thoughtful about what you're using to implement are kind of two good ways to help you succeed.
Excellent. And an excellent note to end on. Grace, it was such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for running us through everything from NYC to how to implement it within your company. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. So much fun. Thank you for having me.
There's no shortage of podcasts and deep dives into the secrets of VC. But the truth is that the world's best venture firms and GPs at their helm still remain an enigma. VC is as much of an art as it is a science. Other shows focus on the now of venture or even the last 10 years. But what separates the most enduring and generation-defining firms is the subject of a podcast called Turpentine VC from the Turpentine Podcast Network. On this season of the show, you'll hear from Ben Horowitz, Alfred Lin, Mahmoud Hamid, and more. Subscribe to Turpentine VC for the rare and revealing conversations that can only be had investor to investor.